maybe someday I'll be a different size, but right now this is the body that I have. And I'm stubbornly going to refuse to stop being mean to it. I'm just going to love it and let the Lord do the rest. And as I practice that, I find joy.
Welcome to Permission Slips, a space to practice paying attention to your life with self-compassion so you can experience the wholeness, purpose, and joy you were made for. I'm Jillian DeBritz, a life and leadership coach and a recovering perfectionist, learning alongside you how to give myself permission to be human. I'm so glad you're here with me today for my conversation with my dear friend, Brandi Hyatt. Brandi, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jillian. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so grateful you said yes to this invitation, as you have led me forward in so many invitations to be kind and gentle with my body. So before we jump into this conversation around practicing gentleness with our bodies, I want you to know who Brandi is. My dear friend Brandi is a wife, a mom, a small business owner, a yoga instructor, and a community advocate. She wears many hats and seeks to share the love of Jesus under them all. My friendship with Brandi developed while we were serving together at a retreat where she introduced me to the concept of yoga as a Christ-centered spiritual practice. What she calls sacred yoga integrates faith-centered meditation and traditional yoga movements for an embodied worship experience that strengthens the body, mind, and soul. And truly, Brandi, your work in your own journey of becoming a yoga instructor and the ways that God has used that to set you free and continue to fight for freedom and kindness toward yourself and your own body, it has overflowed and modeled for me a way of fighting for freedom in my own life that I wouldn't have known without you. And I'm just so grateful for the journey that you've taken and the way that your journey has impacted mine. So thanks for being my friend.
Emotional because I'm like, Jillian's just so nice. She's the nicest friend I ever had. Thank you, Jillian. Like just hearing you say those kinds of things, I'm like, you know, is that you started somewhere and you're on a path. And I'm like, I've come a long way down this path now that I never expected to come down at all, ever.
Yeah, right. And isn't that the beauty, is to look back at the path that you've taken and realize, wow, I'm not the same as I used to be. For so many years, and I resonate with that, for so many years, I thought, I am never going to stop struggling. I'm never going to stop hating my body. And while I have a long way to go still on this journey, I look back and I think I would have never believed that the self-compassion and kindness toward myself that I now have learned to practice more consistently, I would have never believed it was possible. And so, yeah, I love that reminder too. Tell us more about your path, this journey that you've been on, even thinking about how you became a certified yoga instructor in the first place, because I know that has been so pivotal in your journey with God and in your own life. So will you tell us about that story?
I didn't set out to be a yoga instructor, but I had been in a couple of car accidents and just had a lot of back pain. And so I tried like all of the routes of, you know, chiropractic and physical therapy, but I just had a lot of back pain, and I'm a cosmetologist as well. So like practicing my work was painful, just being on your feet all day. Like I had terrible back pain. So I heard it through lots of people, like, if your back hurts, you should do yoga. And I'm like, okay, I'll do anything. So I just started doing a little bit of yoga at home, you know, like YouTube, and it made a big difference. I'm like, my back actually feels better. That worked better than anything else I've ever tried. And so I knew that yoga would help physical pain, but I had no idea like that there was so much more to gain from it. One of my clients is a certified yoga instructor, and she regularly was, you know, teaching students. So I was standing behind the chair one day and she's like, I'm about to start another teacher training for yoga. And I just like blurted out, I was like, I'd really like to do that. And then the moment it came out of my mouth, I wish I could have sucked it back in, because I was really embarrassed, because I am not what I picture a yoga instructor to be. My body does not look like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's going to laugh at me. She's going to give me all the reasons it probably wouldn't be a good fit for me. Like, it's amazing how fast your brain can be like, no. And instead she's like, oh, I would love that, Brandi. And I was like, you would? Okay, I want to do it. I was so scared though. Like my yes came out so quickly, and then I wished that it would go away. But then I was like, but I really do want to do it. So she didn't tell me no, I'm going to do it. But my thought was, I'm just doing this for myself. I'm not going to ever teach other people, but I'm such an information junkie, and I'm also not always very disciplined. So I thought, if I become a yoga instructor, it will help me stay in practice and keep my back from hurting. So really, it was just all selfish desire. But then as I started, the process of training and learning and, guiding like little mini classes through my teacher training, the Lord just was like, this is how you are going to teach, and this is how it's going to be. Yeah. So I think what was happening too in that season of my life, this was 2019, right before like 2020 and COVID shutdown, was I was going through some really intense family trials. And I noticed that every time I would go to class or every time I would teach, I felt better. I felt reset. I felt connected to the Lord. I was like, oh, wow, that was better than anything else I've ever tried for stress relief as well. So you start to connect those boxes, right? You're like, my back hurts less. I feel less stressed. I feel more connected to the Lord. Something's happening here.
Wow. Well, and there's so much of what you just shared that is so important. One, recognizing that there is a connection between our physical embodied experience and our spiritual lives, our spiritual sense of connection with God. But then to also list these other benefits like less back pain, less stress, on top of, I'm sure, the confidence that it gave you to recognize, okay, maybe I'm not what I picture a typical yoga instructor looking like, and yet I did it. So I'm curious about this place of, let me formulate this question. So what was it like for you? And this could be too vulnerable. Tell me if we don't want to answer this. What was it like for you to go through teacher training with this sort of background narrative of I don't fit in the normal yoga teacher box in terms of what I look like and how I expect a yoga teacher to look?
Yeah. Well, I didn't look like anybody in the teacher training. I look back at pictures, I'm like, I'm always the biggest girl in the picture. And am I going to continue to let that bother me and prevent me from living a fun, full life? No one ever shamed me. Everyone only encouraged me. So the internal narrative was the only thing that was stopping me. And I had done some hard work with the Lord to recognize his voice versus the enemy's voice in my mind and heart. And so every time Satan said, you're too fat to do that, I said, take a hike. There's no one that tells me who I am except Jesus Christ. And every time I ask him, he says, go girl. So I just kept like stepping out in faith every time. Like my feelings are going to come out of my eyes for a second, because it takes a lot of faith to speak against the lies of the enemy. Like, who told me I couldn't do that? Only Satan. He's the only one that ever said I couldn't do it. And when I stopped listening to him, and I started listening to the Lord, my life changed. It's really powerful to recognize the lies that we've aligned with, and to let the Lord heal and restore and change that lie into his truth.
Well,
but
and
it's hard work. It's hard
that's what
work.
I was just noticing that is I love that you're naming this is a fight. Like I have to choose to reject what the culture tells me, to reject what the enemy of my own soul is whispering in my mind, to reject the narrative that we've been fed from birth in a world and, especially a Western culture that says smaller is better and you need to look a certain way in order to be beautiful. And so we've been inundated with these lies about what brings us value and what brings us beauty and what qualifies us for the things that we want to do with our bodies or what qualifies us to belong. And so for you to resist, to actively resist those lies, for me to actively resist those lies, for any of us who are listening, it requires intentionality and some grit, right?
Yep.
Like I'm thinking, what are some of the ways? So you said that you were able to recognize, you had spent some time learning to listen to God's voice and learning to recognize what he says about you. So what were some other ways that you fought against those cultural voices, spiritual voices, negative, that negative self-perception that we all have to wrestle with in one way or another? Like what were some of the other ways that you were able to fight that battle?
I mean,
and maybe
honestly,
it's the same thing you just said. Yeah.
No. I love that you're kind of really sussing this out and thinking through like what's the lived experience of making those changes and making those transitions. And for me, the lived experience was continually recognizing if there was guilt or fear or shame in my mind and heart. And then, recognizing that that's not the Lord telling me that. So where did it come from? It could have been, I've always been a big girl, even when I was a little kid, and I've got 3 siblings and they didn't look the same as me. And my grandma would be making them corn dogs while she like stirred up the Slim Fast can to give me. So like my narrative from a very young person was I'm treated differently because I look differently. And I'm not saying those things to speak against my grandma. She was trying to help me, right? Like, which is awful to say it. But she, recognized I was different. So she's like, you have to have the Slim Fast as a 10-year-old little girl while I fry up some homemade corn dogs for your siblings. So like, I
Wow.
have to go really far back and recognize like there's these hurts that have been done to me over the years, not intentionally, sometimes intentionally, like people can be mean and say things. But as I've matured in Christ and I've put this hard work in to listen to him, when I go back to those moments in my life, I see the truth now. So I'm not
Mm,
mad at my grandma or my siblings or even my big body. Like I'm not mad at those things anymore. And they don't hold the power over me that they used to because the Lord is restoring my past with his truths. And so that's the armor that I put on now as I walk forward into putting my large body in front of people and asking them to join me in whatever it is that we're doing, right? Like I just don't want to miss out on life anymore because I came into an agreement with something that's not true. And the
mm.
untruth that Satan is constantly telling me is you are too fat and you are disqualified. You are not qualified to do these things because you're fat. And I'm like, I'm a big girl and Jesus Christ qualifies me. And maybe
Girl.
someday I'll be a different size, but right now this is the body that I have. And I'm stubbornly going to refuse to stop being mean to it. I'm just going to
Yeah.
love it and let the Lord do the rest. And as I practice that, I find joy. Whereas I
Mm.
practiced the other thing for years and years and years, right? Dieting and pills and starving myself or binging or like, just terrible habits. I tried all of that stuff. So I know how that feels.
Right.
It's not like I didn't try it. Now I'm trying this new way and I'm like, oh, this is it. This is the way
Yeah.
to do it.
I love that you said you stubbornly refuse to agree with that old way of thinking about yourself, talking to yourself, agreeing with what the enemy says about you. And that's something you say during yoga practice as you're leading us through our practice often. And I've borrowed that phrase to stubbornly refuse whatever it is that we need to refuse. And often it's about stubbornly refusing to leave the present moment, which is its own sort of mental discipline to stay present in our bodies and with our breath. But also, I've borrowed that phrase, Brandi, from you in other areas of my life
Well,
to
let
stubbornly
me back
refuse.
up a minute. I also borrowed that phrase because it was such a highlight for me. So yes, and maybe it was borrowed from the person before too, right? But it's that mindset of like I have a choice here and I can choose to dig my feet in. You said grit earlier, right? Like I've got some panache in me. I've got some moxie, whatever word you want to use that says no, I wouldn't let someone else abuse me. Why am I letting me abuse myself?
And when you put it in those terms, it feels so obvious and so clear that the way I treat myself, the way I speak to myself so often is abuse. It is absolutely abuse. It makes me think of, I may have shared this before, something I heard a writer, speaker, podcaster named Jess Connolly share as she talks about her book, Breaking Free of Body Shame. And it was some sort of a podcast or something that I was listening to where she said, we have to refuse to continue speaking death over our bodies. We just have to say no more. I'm
Yeah.
not going to do it anymore. And not that those voices and those old narratives that are deeply ingrained in our neural pathways won't ever come back up again. But when they do, we refuse to agree with them, we refuse to stay there, and we stubbornly choose a new, true pathway. We choose to agree with what God says, which is what? Our body is good.
Yeah.
Our body is good. Not because
Yep.
of the way it looks, but because he made it good and he doesn't make junk. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I love that. It's a lot, it's a lot to go back and think about because you're right. It's always going to rear its ugly head, right? Like the shame is always going to come back around. I mean, we've got summertime upon us and, shorts and, more skin exposed. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
Here we go. Am I, you know what? I'm not getting younger. Am I just going to like hide myself forever? So I guess what I want to say based on what you just said before I started talking is it's okay if you're still in a season where you're saying those things about yourself. No matter where you're at in your walk, you're just right with the Lord. And you don't have to change. You could keep living the way that you're living forever and still be right with the Lord. He still loves you right where you're at. But if you put the hard work in, and maybe it's not hard for some people, but for me, it's been hard work because it consistently comes back, because it was ingrained from my youth. But when when you make those changes, it does become easier. But I feel like I need to just like reach whoever's listening right now. And you're like, I'm never going to get there. Wherever you're at right now is just right too. It can look different for everybody. It can look different for every walk. You don't have to change to be loved. Like the measure of who you are right now is enough.
That takes me back to the first time we met, and we were at a women's retreat together. And I don't know how this came up because it was like within a few minutes of introducing ourselves. And this is sort of par for the course in our friendship. But somehow we started talking about body shame. I don't know, in the first couple of minutes. And I was probably sharing something about my struggle, to be around women and, the insecurities that come up. And you were sharing about your journey, and you looked at me and you said to me, Jillian, I have learned to believe what the Lord told me, which is that the scale is not my measure. The scale is not my measure. My worth, my value, my success, my failure, it doesn't come from a scale. It doesn't come from a size that I'm putting on. It doesn't come from whether I'm ready to wear shorts or not. It doesn't come from how I feel about my own body. It doesn't come from how much I'm struggling or not struggling. That's not my measure of worth or value before God. He's already decided. He's already decided that I am valuable. And that's
right, girl.
Done once and for all.
I love that it soaked into you, I love that resonated with you and like stuck, because I heard that through a dear friend and speaker. She had shared that she had let the scale be her measure of like happiness for a long time. And that totally resonated with me, because if the scale was like going up or down, like it was whether or not my feelings were up or down. And I was constantly like a yo-yo, because I'm not one of those people that has like a consistent weight. Like my weight just fluctuates a lot. And maybe a lot of people are like that and they don't talk about it. I don't know. But she had shared that she had said that the Lord told her that no longer would the scale be her measure. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's literally what I'm doing, is letting the scale be my measure of joy. And so that transformed me. That transformed my mind. But I had to practice it then, right? I'm like, all right, that's not my measure. What I see in the mirror, that's not my measure. The number inside my pants or the letters inside my shirts are not the measure of who I am. I'm only going to let Jesus be my measure from now on, ever, period. And that's where like the grit comes in, right? And the moxie, where you're like, I did it the other way before. So I'm in my 40s now, right? So I lived like, I think this has probably been like a 6-year journey more recently with me, like learning to hear the voice of God and follow him. So like 30 something years, I did it the other way. And I still lived a good life, and the Lord still loved me. But I was tortured all the time. And I just like, if anyone can hear something in this moment and recognize there's more freedom to be had in your mental health and in your spiritual walk, this has been pivotal for me in making those changes.
Yeah. And it makes me think of what both of us just referenced, that there have been other people that we've borrowed from. Other people's words that have resonated, that we've borrowed from and practiced on repeat until we had words for ourselves. We believed other people's words toward us until we could believe God's words toward us for ourselves. And I've needed friends like you to over and over and over help me remember what I struggle to hold on to when we're not together. And so I need to show up at yoga with you, or I need to text you, or I need to have a space where I can say, Brandi, I'm struggling again today. Can you remind me of what my measure is? I was sharing with you before we jumped on and started recording that this past weekend, I started spinning out again. And, it's the change in weather and it's pulling out old clothes that maybe don't fit the way they used to or show more skin or whatever it is. And I had this like overwhelming sense of panic and thinking, oh no, I've lost control. I've lost control. I've worked so hard for so many years to keep inside the fat girl that I've always been afraid will come back out. And she got out. She got out. And what does that mean about me? And I realized, one, I couldn't fight this battle alone. Like I couldn't pull myself out, because when we're in a shame spiral, we can't pull ourselves out. We need someone else to reach in and grab our hand and pull us out. It's just what happens neurobiologically. We can't talk ourselves out of shame. We can't logic our way out of shame. We need someone else to be with us in it. And so in that moment, Corey was with me. And so he was my person. But I also knew that I had this conversation with you that I was looking forward to remind me of what's true. Because when my body is flooded with memories that, like you said, go back to childhood. Like we're talking years and years and years of practicing self-hatred. We're talking years in my 20s in college where I had put on so much weight and hated myself so much. And I looked in the mirror this weekend and I felt like my college self. It was like I could feel what it was like to feel like I didn't belong, to feel like people were making fun of me as I was playing college volleyball bigger than anyone else, to feel like I was never going to be loved, that I didn't belong, that no one was going to be attracted to me. All of those feelings that have been embodied in my not just my neural pathways, but in my body. I know what that felt like. That all came flooding back. And it wasn't just this logical, oh, my shorts don't fit. It was like, oh no, this feeling again.
Yeah.
And so as you talk about, yes, this takes a lot of practice. And these are old tapes that we're learning to record a new narrative and give ourselves a new response. I'm also so aware that we can't do this work alone and that we need each other. We need people like you where we can have spaces to practice together, embodying a new truth, a new way of being in our bodies.
So what is the truth for you in these moments then? What was the truth that you came to after you're like, maybe I need to go up a size in my shorts? Like, how'd that feel? Where are you at with that now?
That's such a great question. And I love that you would ask me that. Honestly, it didn't help that I was already struggling and then went shopping because I was looking for some new shorts. And, dressing rooms are always a trigger place for me. And when I was already feeling bad about myself for a lot of legitimate reasons, like I hadn't been eating well and hadn't exercised, like these are some of the triggers for me. When I'm not able to care for my body and nourish it the way that makes me feel like my best, there's these old tapes that say, you failed, and now you're fat. And so in the moment in the dressing room, I was reminding myself, and I do believe this was God reminding me too, it's okay. Don't condemn yourself. You don't need to look in the mirror and pick everything apart. Try on the shorts and then get dressed. You don't need to buy them. It's not the best day to do all of the trying on that maybe you thought. How can you be gentle with yourself? And I was almost stepping back from my own experience and trying to coach myself through because I've practiced. Because I've practiced listening to God in the moment and the voice that reminded me, this is not a measure of your worth. It's not the truest thing about you. How you feel is not the truth. And your body is still good. No matter how you feel, your body is still good. And then I came out of the dressing room and I told Corey, I need you to hug me. I'm trying not to cry. And we got in the car and I wept. I had to tell him all the things. I said, please don't try to fix me. Please just let me name my pain and let me name my grief, because I feel like my college self all over again. And it's really painful. And bless him, we've done enough work in marriage counseling where he was able to say, wow, that sounds really hard. And so he made space for my pain. So to be fully honest with you, I'm coming to you looking for some answers, Brandi, because I am still in that place of like, I'm fighting this week. When I look in the mirror, I'm noticing that my arms are bigger. I'm noticing that my pants don't fit the way they used to. And that's real, right? Like there is a change. And so I'm choosing to go back to what I've practiced over the last several years, which is to tell myself my body is good no matter how I feel. My body's allowed to change and my size is not my measure. So I don't know if you have any thoughts or advice for a girl like me in a moment like this.
I think that you're doing the hard work, Jillian. Like that's what I hear you doing. I kind of wonder what it is about your college girl that maybe you want to go back and talk to. And, have you ever done that thing where you were really cruel to yourself at a certain season in your life based on how you looked? And then you actually look back at those pictures and you're like, why wasn't I nice to her?
Yeah.
She's gorgeous. And I know I've experienced that many times in my life. And that's kind of why now people are like, enjoy yourself now, because you never know what it's going to be like later.
Totally.
But there's truth to that. And so like I look back and I'm like, gosh, I wasn't nice to that girl in her 20s, meaning myself. I was always so mean to her, but gosh, look at her. She was beautiful. And so I try to like practice that now. So maybe like, is there a moment with your college girl, Jillian, that you can, give her permission to be beautiful?
I think that's so powerful. But I think you're absolutely right that it's been so powerful in different areas of my life to, with God, imagine myself going back and loving, giving the compassion and care to that version of myself that I beat up or didn't receive the compassion and care I needed at the time. And so I think you're right on. And I'm wondering, as you think about practicing, offering ourselves compassion and care, how for you has yoga been a place where you're able to practice being gentle with your body?
Well, it's not, you can do super aerobic yoga, but that's not my jam. Like for me, I really need to create space in my body. It gets tight, it gets bound up. And so yoga offers me an opportunity to stretch things out and create space. And I think I said earlier, I was finding that space in relief of back pain. I was finding that space also in my mental health. It just gives you a moment to pause and reset. And, sometimes people talk about, calming your monkey mind down. Like I've got a monkey mind and it holds a bunch of stuff and it just gets like a hurricane in there. But you don't have time to hold your monkey mind when you are practicing yoga. If you're practicing intentionally, because you're focusing on holding a posture and finding your limit in that posture, and you're practicing on connecting your breath to that posture. And when you are doing those things, you do not have time to hold the monkey mind, the craziness, the busy thoughts, whatever you want to call it. So I just found so much freedom in that. And it really helped me through some intense times, especially with some, family dynamics that were happening within my extended family. I don't think I would have gotten through that as well as I did if I didn't return to the practice of yoga. So I think that's why I don't just practice this for back pain anymore. Like I practice this to calm myself down and center myself and connect with the Lord. Lots of times, if I'm using someone else's class on YouTube or something, a lot of people will pose this moment of like, what's a word or phrase coming to your mind today that you want to hold on to? And man, anytime that is offered to me, it's always the Lord. I'm just like, I always just hear Jesus, and it's like I inhale him and I exhale him and I feel reset. And I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't taken a moment to do it. So I hope that kind of answers your question of like, what does this practice offer me? Like it offers a lot for me.
Yeah.
And I think that it might be shocking for some people to hear how faith related this is for me. I certainly have people like in my Christian life that have been very clear that they are not going to practice yoga because that is not of the Lord. And I understand, like everyone needs to walk out their own walk. But for me, I've never been more connected to the Lord than through these kinds of practices. It's almost like the only other time I can compare it to is if you're in like a deep worship session, and all the lights are down and the music is like moving through your soul and the tears just pour down from your eyes, like it's cleansing. Like that is the experience that I have with the Lord through this practice of yoga. And that's probably why it's sacred, right? Like it's a sacred moment with the Lord.
Yeah. Well, it just makes me think about how when our hearts are in a posture of looking for God and seeking to know him more, anything is worship. Anything is worship. And I think about, Brother Lawrence, the French monk who talked about, washing potatoes as worship. That was prayer.
Mm-hmm.
That was his way of connecting with God. Like in all things, we have the opportunity to turn our attention to the one who's already paying attention to us. And I hear you saying, yoga is a place where my mind is stilled. I teach my mind to be still. I take my thoughts captive, which comes from the Bible, this idea of taking our thoughts captive, renewing our minds, choosing to think about things that are good and true and right and pure and lovely and admirable. And we fix our thoughts on things above, not things below. And so I'm with you. For me, yoga, and especially as you lead us intentionally through sacred yoga, Brandi. And if you ever have a chance to take a class with Brandi, she does such a beautiful job of bringing in scripture and the practice of Lectio Divina, or even just sharing from her own reflections with God and inviting us into breath prayer and using the practice and the postures to remind us of truths that are more than just spiritual abstract ideas, right? Like these are embodied truths that God intends us to live out in our flesh and bones. And so I love that this has been a place where you've taught me to embody my faith, where there's integration between our heart, mind, body, and soul. And I truly believe that's God's design. That's what sanctification is, becoming whole, becoming more integrated and whole. So I love this way to physically work out our salvation, to physically work out and embody our faith and move from the head to the heart through our hands.
Yeah, it's super powerful.
Yeah.
And you'll notice it in your play out in your everyday life, whether it's in a dressing room for yourself or whether you're offering someone else, a word or a phrase or some love, right? Like as you practice those postures and model the way that the Lord intends us to live, which is deeply connected to Him and then deeply connected to the community around us.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me too of the spiritual practice of contemplative prayer, which really is a way of turning our attention. Like I said earlier, I can't remember who I first heard say this, whether it was Ian Morgan Cron or someone else, turning our attention to the one who's already paying attention to us. It's disciplining our mind to quiet down everything else. And that's actually a spiritual practice. So to then bring in my body through the practice of sacred yoga and allow my body to be a part of the quieting of my mind, there is something so helpful for me in that spiritually, that then I'm able to take, like you said, to other places where I know how to take a breath in the midst of my stressful day. I know how to pay attention to what's happening in my body and like, oh, there's tension. I know how to notice that now. I know how to notice when I'm holding my breath, to take a breath, to quiet my mind and to refocus my attention on God, because I've practiced it in yoga and in other places. So I'm wondering, there's so many phrases that you use as you lead that I have found really helpful. And I'm wondering if there are a few things that you find yourself repeating to help people connect yoga to their everyday life, or phrases that you want to offer for listeners here.
Well, I definitely always say in every class that just as you can hold something hard, so too can you let it go. And just as you can take an inhale, so too can you exhale. So just noticing, like, it's okay to have seasons where you're holding really hard things, but they don't last forever. So maybe it's just a breath or two, or maybe, it's a longer hold, but we're not intended to constantly be in strife. We're promised we're going to have struggle, but we're not supposed to be in strife in the struggle.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that, and the reason I share it is because I notice it in my own life. I'm like, okay, Lord, that was really hard. And thank you for helping me through it. And I couldn't have got through it without you. And I'm glad to release it now.
Something else that you talk about often is this idea of doing no harm to our bodies, even as we're moving through postures. My tendency when I think about any sort of exercise has always been like, push myself as hard as I can and then push harder. It doesn't count unless it's painful. Yeah. And so it's been this flipping upside down of my old way of thinking about movement, to hear you reminding me to be gentle with myself and to do no harm. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so that's not an original thought. That's actually a practice in yoga. It's called ahimsa, which means to not harm or be violent to yourself. And that's something you're supposed to introduce to people every time you start a class, because you never know who's in your class and you never know who's going to try to hurt themselves, just to get a little deeper into the posture, to get their forehead to their knee, to get their nose to their toes. That's not a practice that I do. I like to encourage people, especially with me, with my fuller sized body right now. There's plenty of postures I can't access like the fullest expression of that posture. But that's not how yoga works. The way that yoga works is your fullest expression, you get the full benefit of. So maybe your forehead is a mile away from your knee, but if you're feeling sensation in that posture, you've received the full benefit of it. That's all you're looking for. So everyone's full benefit in yoga looks completely different. And that's why I like to remind people of that. Also, to not be judgy or critical or compare yourself to other people. It's definitely a space where
Yes.
you want to just be curious. That's what I say a lot in class is be curious about how that feels in your body and without trying to change it, right? There's lots of moments where you want to notice something and not change it. Notice your natural native breath without trying to take a big breath first. Like as you notice and you tune into yourself, then you're able to make a better informed decision on where you're going to go next. And all of that stuff plays out in everyday life, not just on the mat. But when you practice it on the mat, I say, get on your mat and work it out. And then when you're off your mat, go give it to the world because that's where it's going to be. That's why I'm talking about it. That's why you and I are here because it's so powerful that I can't be quiet about it. I'm like, who else wants to hear about this? I'm happy to talk.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering for people who are hearing this and are like, oh, I want to try yoga. And also I'm intimidated and I don't know where to start. Do you have any advice for people who are drawn to this idea of practicing yoga, but either don't want to have a negative experience or maybe are intimidated or unsure where to begin?
Yeah. If you're a person of faith, pray about it first. Is this something you want me to try, Lord? I mean, it might not be yoga for you. Maybe it's a walk. What are you looking for first? What's your desire? What's your motive for trying something new? That's what I would ask people first. Like you check yourself first before you just leap into something based on what Brandi or Jillian has said. Like you can choose best for you. I cannot choose best for you. And then if it is still yoga that you're like, actually, yeah, it's still yoga. I want to try it. There's plenty of YouTube out there. Start with a 10-minute class. Find something that says gentle or for beginners if you're a beginner. And even if you're not a beginner and you've practiced yoga regularly and you are like a vinyasa and I want to sweat and I want to like work hard, maybe it would be interesting for you to try a gentle practice for yourself as well and try a new modality of yoga. So I guess that would be my advice. Like start small, be curious, and just pray through it too. Like see what the Lord has for you in every part of your life, not just yoga. What does he have for you when you're in the dressing room? What does he have for you while you're folding clothes? What does he have for you while you're totally stressing out, while you're trying to juggle 10 things and get your family out the door? Like all of those little moments add up to what does the Lord want for you in that moment?
Yeah. And I hear you saying that yoga or any other place where we intentionally pay attention to what's happening within ourselves and our bodies and where the Lord may be in that, any place we practice paying attention is going to strengthen our ability to not only be gentle with ourselves, but to encounter God in the midst of our everyday life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you for this. This has been such a beautiful conversation, friend. Before we wrap up, is there a permission slip that you'd want to give to people listening?
Let me think about that. I was actually just giving myself permission slips just to get on this chat with you today because life was happening faster than I was able. And I just needed to be like, Brandi, you have permission to take a minute and clean yourself up. And you have permission to not try to juggle all these things. You have permission to be present with Jillian. So like I was already, Jillian, thank you so much. Everybody that's listening out there, the permission slips are so effective because it's just like what we're talking about with yoga. You're noticing what you're feeling and then you're offering yourself an alternative. It doesn't have to look a super stressful way. It doesn't always have to be just one way. You can get permission. I just want to say, Jillian, like I share that with a lot of people all the time. I'll have someone, sitting in the salon chair talking about holding something really hard. And I'm like, I just want to offer you permission that it's okay if you don't want to hold that anymore. Maybe it's, taking care of somebody, or maybe it's, something hard in your job or relational or financial, but like sometimes we just need permission to look at life differently. And maybe you don't take the different, but at least you looked at it and thought, actually, no, I still want to be right here. So permission for your listeners, I give you permission to stubbornly refuse to agree with Satan any longer about anything awful that he says to you ever again. You have permission to disagree with lies, and you have permission to tune into the one who knows you and loves you and calls you his.
Brandi, I received that permission for myself, and I can't imagine a better permission slip for you to give. Thank you for this. This has been a gift.
Thank you, Jillian.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Permission Slips. I hope this conversation will invite you to notice the places where you might need to practice a little more gentleness toward yourself and your body. Remember, Your life matters. And so does how you treat yourself, more than you know.